Well, hello everybody. I hope I am sounding okay. One thing I wanted to say is I've never done this before in this format that I can attest to, so I'd like to try and do this for a little bit, see what it's going to look like. I'm obviously moved by a particular story that what do you call it? That is the topic of today's conversation that you might see, and that story being the approval of aducanumab. And naturally, first of all, I'd like to find a way to find a link to the stream that I can post with somebody. Oh, there you go. Share live stream. There you go. Fantastic. I can put it up. Let's see, maybe on Facebook. How about that? Yeah, I look a little bit darker than I'd like, but that's okay. There you go. There's my link. Should go up on Facebook pretty soon. Let's see, I'll also post it on LinkedIn probably. Let's see if anybody's interested in this conversation. So, let's see, is anybody watching? Well, somebody's watching. Who are you? Identify yourself. Yeah, so obviously today, Saturday afternoon, I sort of tried to make a non-verbal, or rather verbal commitment, non-written commitment to try and post a video every Saturday, or at least every weekend. And today is a bit different, as always. For me, I'm trying to find different ways to talk about things. And one of them that I found is to try and do some streaming of my thoughts on some of the recent news. And this week's news is obviously really big in the world of biopharma. Let me just finish this post on LinkedIn now, and I'll get back to this story really quickly. Right. So, going back to this particular conversation. So, this is a story from NPR News. Obviously, the title is 3 experts have resigned from FDA committee over Alzheimer's drugs approval. So, a bit of a backstory for those of you who may or may not know. Biogen, which is one of the very large biopharmaceutical companies, has been investigating Alzheimer's disease for quite a few years, and its latest drug candidate, aducanumab, which is an antibody, was undergoing various clinical trials over the last several years in hopes of demonstrating efficiency in destroying amyloid plaques, which is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. But few things have happened in the last few years that were very interesting in this process of clinical trials and now subsequent approval that has led to where we are in this particular issue of people resigning from FDA advisory committee and people not really being convinced that the drug works. So over the years, as the clinical trials were going on and as the results were being published, the drug actually and the efficacy of the drug specifically faced a lot of criticism when it comes to its efficacy, when it comes to its safety, because there was significant side effects, I think, being reported. And naturally, there was a lot of skepticism about whether or not this drug would get approved. And there was a great deal of speculation about it, actually, in the media, especially over the last couple of years. Interestingly, I can probably try and pull up Biogen's stock price. Biogen stock price. Well, let's see if I can do last 5 years. So this is a very interesting graph. So the reason it's so interesting to me is you could see there's several instances over the last few years where the price of the shares of Biogen actually spiked by really big margin, and inadvertently most of them had something to do with aducanumab and the news associated with it, which is interesting in and of itself. It's not so much a discussion about the efficacy of the drug, but how the news about the efficacy of the drug can really influence in a dramatic way the share price of a company that is obviously working to get this drug approved. So there were several instances where there was larger amounts of skepticism, which led to the sharp sell-off, like you see here in 2019, as well as boosts of optimism about the chances of this drug being approved based on some press releases from the company or some of the reports that are sort of surfaced. So ultimately, I've been following this particular drug for a couple of years now, and what's important about sort of the landscape of where this drug is sort of falling in is this field of Alzheimer's research is obviously extremely important because a lot of people get diagnosed with Alzheimer's. The prevalence of adults getting diagnosed early is increasing, and there's still no disease-modifying medicines, drugs that are available on the market. Essentially, up until now, there was some symptom alleviating medication that has been available for a bit, but there's so many issues with investigating this disease because actually to this day there's still no consensus in the field as to what are the exact causes of the Alzheimer's disease, and there is not a consensus on what is the best solution to treating the underlying causes. There's several symptoms that you can monitor, such as amyloid plaque formation in the brain, but ultimately people are still not sure whether it's a symptom of the disease or whether it's the root cause of it. So Biogen's sort of assumption was that, okay, it is amyloid plaque formation that contributes to the progression of the disease, and therefore if we target that and start to limit that with our antibody, aducanumab, this is going to help disease progression and improve the outcome for the patients if it's administered early. The interesting thing about the clinical trials, obviously there was a lot of controversy as far as the efficacy of that drug, not because of just the underlying data that was provided for analysis, but because of the analysis itself. The effects that were described from that drug on the patients were, I guess, depending on who was doing the analysis, and what's the cutoffs to some of those analyses. Basically, there was no consensus on the efficacy either, because depending on, again, statisticians, like way of how you interpret the data, the outcomes might be different. But ultimately, there was so much speculation that this drug will get approved because there is just so much pressure on FDA to get this out there to the patients who obviously are desperate for any kind of new medicine. But ultimately, there was a lot of back and forth between Biogen, FDA, its advisory committee that obviously is supposed to help FDA come to unbiased, rooted in science decision whether or not to approve this drug or not. Ultimately, this week, FDA decided to approve this drug, going against the opinion of the advisory committee. In fact, this latest spike in November, I believe, of last year, was as a result of and subsequent sell-off, if you could see, actually was a result of two news stories that broke within few days of one another. One of them being a positive story of higher than ever chances of aducanumab being approved, and the other one being actual vote from the advisory committee, almost unanimously saying that that the FDA should not approve this drug. So it was very speculative for a long time whether or not this is going to happen. And now that the drug ultimately has been approved, the advisory committee members, at least 3 of them now, have tendered their resignation, which is a huge sign of almost like a vote of no confidence in FDA's ability to make decisions that are in the best interests of the patients. Which you can argue that obviously the advisory committee is not meant for making the final decision. They're just there to advise, but obviously they still lend their professional opinion on the data that has been so controversial in the last few years. And ultimately, it's very interesting to see that there is such a hype around this drug, but the blowback from the industry, not just from the advisory committee members, but also just across the board on many fronts, like lots of industry colleagues that I've seen on LinkedIn actually expressing their concerns about the drug, expressing their concerns about FDA's approval process. That's on one side of the hand. On the other side of the hand, you have public that is eager to accept the risks of some potential side effects and just eager to try this medicine. But obviously another completely other side of the equation is the price. The price for this medicine being actually quite high. I think its list price for that year's supply of drugs sits at about $50,000, which again is not exactly what an end user and the patient would end up paying, but it illustrates the high price point that insurers would have to bear when recommending to use this particular medicine for a patient. And that illustrates some of the other issues about the prices for medicines in America in the first place. But it's such an interesting story where you have the drug that has so much controversy, you have its high price, and you have public's opinion being split on whether or not it's a good idea to use this drug or not, and whether FDA actually makes the best decisions. So it's almost like a perfect storm of so many issues that have been brewing on lately when it comes to public's perception of state of innovation in the biopharma industry. That it's almost important. It's almost as important to just talk about this being an example of the larger microcosm of the issues that the industry is experiencing right now across the board. So, I mean, obviously, this turns out into more of a monologue of myself thinking about it. I wish I had a partner that would be interested in discussing this with me further. So, if anybody would like to jump on like a Zoom call or whatever type of a platform that you'd like to discuss this on this public platform such as YouTube, to spur the conversation further, let me know in the comments below. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this a little, I guess monologue about this particular issue. There's obviously lots of other stories that I like to read myself. Not all of them are as interesting to me as well as this particular one, because this is a culmination of many years of speculation, of this public anticipation of this decision. I remember talking with some of my friends even a few years back whether or not this is going to get approved, and now that it has, we'll see what are going to be the wider implications for the patients, most importantly whether or not it's going to actually have the benefit. So in all of that discussion about public's opinion, the cost of the medication and all that stuff, the most important thing is whether or not it's efficacious, whether or not it has the benefits that Biogen says it does, and whether or not it's going to help improve quality of life, maybe slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease, which is all we should hope for and all should care about. I mean, I don't believe there is anybody that would actually want this drug to fail, in all honesty. It's only about whether or not it's as efficacious as we all hope it to be. And if it is, that's an amazing win for Biogen, and they sort of stuck to their guns, and perhaps an incremental improvement in this area is just long overdue, and this should just spur further investment into alternative types of candidates. There's actually quite a few, I think at least 3 or 4 other clinical candidates that are undergoing trials right now that may actually unseat Biogen's aducanumab going forward. So only time will tell how this is going to change the landscape for Alzheimer's treatments going forward. And this is kind of the end of what I wanted to talk about on this particular video. So thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. I do hope to bring more content to you guys. Please let me know what you think about this particular story, and whether or not you'd like to be on the next conversation and not a monologue about some of those breaking stories that we have in the biopharma world. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Pavel. Until next time, bye-bye.